This is Only Horror. If you can hear me, then it's already too late. Let's begin. The buyer wanted to test it inside. The guy who answered my Facebook Marketplace listing did not care about the computer I was selling. He cared about getting into my house. This happened last February when I was trying to sell my old gaming PC after building a new one. Money was tight, so I listed it on Facebook Marketplace for $650. That afternoon, a guy named Eric messaged me. His profile looked real enough. Older picture, a couple local comments, normal questions about the specs and graphics card. Nothing about him stood out. He asked if he could come by around 7:30 that night. I said that was fine. I lived alone in a small house outside Harrisburg. The garage was detached and sat a little behind the house. Around 7:20, I moved the PC out there and set it on an old workbench. I turned on the overhead light and left the side door cracked. At 7:34, a dark sedan pulled up and parked along the curb instead of in my driveway. The driveway was open, and if he was planning to load a computer, parking on the street made no sense. The driver got out after a few seconds. He looked like his picture. Black jacket, jeans. He waved once and walked up the driveway. I met him near the garage and said the computer was inside. He did not answer right away. He looked past me toward the house first, then finally into the garage. Then he asked if I lived there alone. I laughed a little and said my brother was inside, which was a lie. He nodded and stepped into the garage. I plugged the PC in and hit the power button. The fans spun up, the lights came on, and the monitor showed the lock screen. Then he said he needed to test it with a game running. I told him I had already reset the system. He smiled and said we could just hook it up inside real quick, where it was warmer. I said no. He got annoyed and said he was not handing over $650 without making sure it worked under load. I told him that was fine, and if he wanted to pass, I would find another buyer. Then his whole attitude changed. He got less pushy and asked if he could use my bathroom before he drove back because he had been in traffic forever. That caught me off guard. I was already uncomfortable, but there was still that pressure not to be rude when someone suddenly starts acting normal again. I hesitated, then told him to make it quick. He thanked me right away. I walked him through the kitchen and pointed to the bathroom off the hallway. Then he asked if I could grab him a glass of water, too. I said sure. While I was at the sink filling a glass, I heard the bathroom door open again much sooner than I expected. Not footsteps coming back toward me, just the door opening, then quiet. I set the glass down and stepped into the hall. Eric was not coming out of the bathroom. He was standing near the opening to my living room, looking toward the front windows and staircase like he was taking in the layout. I said, "Bathroom's right there." He turned and smiled like I had startled him. Then he said, "Oh, my bad. I thought this was it." That made no sense. The bathroom door was open and the light was on right behind him. He went in then and shut the door. I stayed in the kitchen listening. I could hear small movements in there, then another sound near the frosted window above the toilet. When he came out, he dried his hands slowly while looking past me toward the back door. Then he asked if the basement was finished. I asked why. He shrugged and said he was just wondering where I kept the rest of my setup. That was enough for me. I told him the sale was over and that he needed to leave. He tried smiling again like I was overreacting, but I opened the front door and stood there until he walked out. I locked the door and watched from the front window as he got into the sedan. He sat there for maybe 20 seconds with the brake lights glowing. Then he drove off. I checked the bathroom first. Nothing obvious was missing, but the frosted window above the toilet had been unlocked. I never leave that window unlocked. It opens outward and is too small for anyone to climb through, but it faces the narrow side yard between my house and the fence. It would have been an easy way to test the latch or signal to somebody outside. Then I went back to the garage to bring the computer inside. That was when I noticed the side gate to my backyard was unlatched. I had locked it that morning because the wind kept blowing it open. My first thought was that Eric had slipped out there somehow while I was in the kitchen. My second thought was worse. Maybe he had not come alone. I brought the computer inside, locked the garage, and took the listing down. About 10 minutes later, while I was in the living room pretending to watch TV, my phone buzzed. It was Eric. "You should have just let me test it." I blocked him and checked the front door again. Around 11 o'clock that night, I heard the metal latch on my side gate click. My bedroom was at the front of the house, so I could not see the gate from there, but I knew that sound. A few seconds later, I heard it again, followed by the faint scrape of the gate opening inward. I got out of bed, grabbed my phone, and moved into the hallway as quietly as I could. I went to the living room window that looked down the side of the house and pulled the curtain back maybe an inch. There was a man standing by the gate. Not Eric. This guy was bigger and wearing a hoodie with the hood up. He was half hidden by the fence, just standing there, like he was waiting for someone to signal him. My first thought was that they thought I was asleep. My second was that Eric had definitely not come alone. I backed away from the window and called 911 in a whisper. While I was on with the dispatcher, I heard footsteps move across the side yard toward the back of the house. Slow, careful steps, then nothing. The dispatcher told me officers were on the way and to stay on the line. I went into the kitchen and crouched under the window. Then I heard something at the back door. Not pounding, just the doorknob turning once, slowly, like somebody checking whether it was locked. A few seconds later it happened again. Then I heard the same thing at the garage side door. They were checking, testing, seeing what opened. Then my phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. "You lied. Nobody else is there." I told the dispatcher about the message, and she said officers were less than 2 minutes out. Right after that, I heard one hard knock on the back door, just one. Then another lower down, like someone hitting the wood near the lock. I grabbed one of the kitchen chairs and jammed it under the back doorknob. Then I heard quick footsteps cutting back across the yard. Headlights flashed through the side window a second later. As soon as the police cruiser turned onto my street, I heard the gate slam and a car door shut somewhere out front. By the time officers got to the backyard, whoever had been there was gone. They checked the property with flashlights and found muddy shoe prints near the back steps and fresh marks on the garage door handle. One of the officers asked whether anyone had been at the house earlier that night besides somebody I knew. That was when I told them about the Facebook Marketplace buyer. I showed them the messages. The older officer walked the side yard with his flashlight before calling me over. In the strip of mulch under the bathroom window were 2 cigarette butts and scuff marks near the fence, like someone had been standing there earlier. Then he looked at the little frosted window and asked if it had been locked before. I said it had. He nodded and said whoever came that night likely used the sale as an excuse to see the property, find out if I lived alone, and figure out which doors were easiest to reach from the street. He said they do that sometimes. Ask to test electronics inside. Ask to use the bathroom. Ask who else is home. The next morning, I noticed my trash cans had been moved from the side of the garage to a spot near the fence, stacked almost like someone had used them to step up and look over. I ended up keeping the computer. What gets me now is how normal the whole thing seemed, right up until it did not. He looked like his profile. He asked the right questions. He even brought cash. If I had kept trying to be polite, I might have let him walk through the whole house instead of just the hallway. That is all he really needed. Just a minute. A week later, I changed the locks and put up motion cameras. One of them caught a dark sedan creeping past my house just after midnight, 3 days after the police came. I could not prove it was him, but I have not sold a single thing from my house since. If you enjoyed tonight's story, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. And if you want more horror like this, make sure you're subscribed. New stories are coming soon. Until next time, keep the lights on.